Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel and today we are going to talk about ethmoid bone. So let's start our topic with introduction. Ethmoid bone is a small, delicate and unpaired cranial bone that is located at the midline of anterior cranial base between the orbits and above the nasal cavity. Despite its small size, it plays a vital role in formation of nasal cavity, the orbits and anterior cranial fossa. Because of its slight spongy structure, it is filled with air cells and it is sometimes called as sieve bone. Location and structure of ethmoid bone. It is situated between the frontal bone and sphenoid bone. It forms part of nasal septum, the medial wall of orbit and roof of nasal cavity. It contains multiple air-filled cavities that are called the ethmoidal air cells or ethmoidal air sinuses. Parts of ethmoid bone include cribriform plate, crista galli, perpendicular plate, and ethmoidal labyrinth. All of these parts you can see in this diagram very clearly. Now let's talk about these parts of ethmoid bone one by one. So first part of ethmoid bone is cribriform plate. It is a horizontal plate that forms the roof of nasal cavity. It contains multiple tiny openings that are also called as olfactory foramina, through which olfactory nerve passes, that is first cranial nerve, and it carries the sense of smell from the nasal cavity to the brain. Next part of ethmoid bone is crista galli, that is a vertical projection that arises from cribriform plate. As you can see in diagram, it serves as an attachment point for phallic cerebri, that is a dural fold that separates the two cerebral hemispheres. Next part of ethmoid bone is perpendicular plate. As you can see in diagram, it is a thin vertical plate that projects downward from the cribriform plate. It forms the superior portion of nasal septum, thus dividing the nasal cavity into right and left halves. Next part of ethmoid bone is ethmoidal labyrinth, that are lateral masses. They are pair structure located on either side of perpendicular plate. They contain the ethmoidal air cells or ethmoidal air sinuses as you can see in the diagram. They form part of medial walls of orbit and lateral walls of nasal cavity. They give rise to superior nasal conchae and middle nasal conchae, which are scroll-like projection that increase surface area of nasal cavity to warm, filter and humidify inhaled air. Important features of ethmoid bone. First is ethmoidal sinuses, that are air-filled cavities within the bone that open into nasal cavity. Second feature is superior and middle nasal conchae. They are bony projection that regulate airflow and support the mucous membrane. Third feature is olfactory foramina. They allow passage of olfactory nerves that are fibers of sensory smell, that is first cranial nerve fibers. Fourth feature. Now let's talk about articulations of ethmoid bone. Ethmoid bone articulates with 13 bones that include its articulation with cranial bones and facial bones. Articulation of ethmoid bone with cranial bones include articulation with frontal bone and sphenoid bone. Articulation of ethmoid bone with facial bones include articulation of ethmoid bone with two nasal bones, two maxillary bones, two lacrimal bones, two palatine bones, two inferior nasal conchae, and one vomer. Functions of ethmoid bone. First is structure bone, as this bone contributes to nasal septum, orbital walls, and cranial base. Second function is its respiratory role, as this bone contains conchae and sinuses that filter, humidify, and warm inhaled air. Third function is olfaction, as this bone provides foramina for olfactory nerves, thus enabling sense of smell. Fourth function of ethmoid bone is weight reduction, as air cells in this lighten the skull while maintaining the strength. Fifth functions of ethmoid bone is protection, as this bone forms part of separation between nasal cavity and brain. Conclusion of this lecture video. Ethmoid bone is a lightweight but complex cranial bone that is essential for structure and function of nasal cavity, orbit, and cranial base. Its cribriform plate enables olfaction, its perpendicular plate forms part of nasal septum, and its conchae help condition inhaled air. Although fragile, it is vital for both respiration and sensory function. And this was all about ethmoid bone. Hopefully you liked the video. If you do, don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment. Thank you for watching.